So Diablo 4 is finally going to be getting some legit new endgame content called the Abattoir of Zir. Is that how you pronounce it? Anyhow, with the Avatar meant to be a challenge even beyond, or perhaps well beyond, Nightmare Dungeon 100 and even Uber Lilith, we can pretty safely say that with how difficult it'll be, that we'll be approaching it with quite a different way than we have been approaching the game's current content. And so with that, here are 5 ways that you can begin preparing for the Avatar even right now, so that when it comes out, you can get a head start or even begin dominating it right away. With that, the very first tip, and this is a quick one because it is to complete the Season 2 season journey, since that is the prerequisite to unlocking the Avatar in the first place. But keep in mind that you don't have to complete necessarily each and every objective of the season journey. You simply need to complete the minimum number of objectives required to advance to the next stage. And so this means you can definitely pick and choose the objectives to do, and it would actually do you well to start planning for the exact ones you want to target, right? Your goal is to get through the season journey as early as you can. And on to tip number 2, and that is to shore up your defenses and crowd control. And first of all, for defenses, in the Avatar, it's been confirmed that monsters will be at an even higher level than that of tier 100 Nightmare Dungeons. And currently, against tier 100 monsters, which are level 154, you'll need around 13,500 armor to have armor cap against those or that level of monsters. Which means if you're going to be going up against monsters at a higher level, you'll want to ideally have even higher armor than 13,500, right? And this is actually not the easiest to achieve. You'll first of all want to roll percent armor or percent total armor on ideally your helm, your chest, and maybe even your boots if you're not going to be using Tybalt's Will, or perhaps you'll want to swap out your Tybalt's Will, which would likely cause you to lose damage, but to get more percent total armor. Another way to get it would be on your amulet. So if you can, perhaps keep it on your amulet, your helm, your chest piece, and then if you still need additional armor, you can consider using the disobedience aspect as well, while still being able to keep Tybalt's Will. And the second thing to be mindful of is obviously resistances, which you'll want to have 70% at the base cap. But if you're fighting against really powerful monsters that use a specific element type, especially ones like poison, and perhaps if you're fighting against Lord Zir, assuming that he'll be featured in the Abattoir of Zir, you'll want fire resist. So for those elements, you'll want to have plus max resist as well. And to do that, you can use things like elixirs and certain skill choices and so forth. But either way, if you're able to get any points of max resist extending beyond 70%, that actually greatly help you against those specific elements. And balancing your offense and defense will kind of depend on how the monsters scale up, right? If they're going to be scaling up, if say your limiting factor in progression is defense, then you'll want to focus more on defense. If the limiting factor is more offense, since apparently there will also be a timer in these dungeons, then you want to also have offense, right? But I think a balance of offense and defense is, usually the most ideal. Just the point at which you want to balance this is still yet to be tested. But another thing that you can add, I think, pretty easily incorporate into a build, while sacrificing maybe just a little bit of damage, is crowd control. So look through your skills, maybe even your gear choices for synergistic ways that you can add in some additional crowd control that will undoubtedly help your survivability as well if you need it. And on to tip number 3, and that is to prepare and stash up some alternate pieces of gear and even aspects or uniques in case you need to tweak your build or even swap specs entirely, right, if you're open to that. Because again, a lot of specs will prioritize different affixes and of course legendary powers and uniques, so it might be wise to store some up. I personally have a bank tab called potential rerolls, and I've recently begun collecting pieces. While I started my rogue, for example, with twisting blades, I'm actually collecting different types of pieces with affixes that a death trap rogue would prefer. So I'm actually going to be open to pivoting between the two builds, or even if you can go for a quick gear swap in between a run or before a boss fight, if that's even allowed in the Avatar, that's a potential thing that you may want to prepare for as well, right? For example, before a boss fight, you can swap to something more single target oriented in terms of your gear and aspects and even skill or paragon choices. And of course, one way that you can easily find out the alternate pieces of gear that you can collect is to go on to websites like maxroll.com, look at the endgame tier list, and also pick the ones that you would be interested in playing, and then start collecting some gear that might be useful that might not be the same as the ones that you're already using. And for tip number 4, in a very similar vein, and that is to level up as many of your alternate paragon glyphs, say past the ones that you're already using. Just keep leveling up additional ones that you might potentially need to use. For example, if you need more defense, you can swap to a more defensive one. If you need one for a different build, you can also do that. So keep doing more nightmare dungeons and leveling up additional glyphs just in case. And not only that, but you can also do your blood harvest events, which is the season 2 vampire hell tides, right? The green hell tides for additional accursed bloods to be able to power up additional vampiric powers in case you need to swap out a few, or even if you're able to be able to swap between them in the middle of a run and so forth, right? There are definitely some defensive ones that you can consider using if needed. For example, there's the damage reduction vampiric power called Resilience that could be pretty useful. Of course, some of the standard ones are going to be good. Hemomancy, I'm not sure how much damage that's going to be doing in super late games, so maybe a potential one to swap out would be Hemomancy. It's just really good for speed farming. So of course, anything for speed farming or prioritize or optimize for that is probably not going to be as ideal for the Abattoir, right? So another one that you can potentially swap out or swap in rather is something like Undying the vampiric power, but you'll heal you whenever you cast a spell. So sustain, I guess I haven't mentioned it yet, but sustain and healing might actually be quite strong in the Abattoir too, combined with of course your defenses, right? And with that, an item like the Doombringer, which would actually heal you and also give you max life, by the way, Doombringer might actually be a really powerful item if you're able to get it, as is the helmet, the Endariel's Visage, with both being uber uniques that you will likely need to get from Uber Duriel. And finally, for my 5th tip, and I think this might be pretty frequently overlooked, and that is to farm materials, especially herbs, for your elixirs and also incenses. There are some incenses that are actually really powerful, especially if you run with a group. And incenses only last 20 minutes, even though they do now persist through death with Season 2. You'll be burning through them pretty quickly if you want to consecutively use them in the Abattoir, right? With some of the instances costing quite a few herbs and resources. So it might be good to farm up not only herbs, useful for elixirs. I would say defensive elixirs might be the best bet, especially some of the ones that give you max resist could be really useful. Or you can perhaps swap around and see which ones might be the best. The ones from Helltide that are exclusive drops, especially the Elixir of Fortitude giving you max life, could actually be quite good as well, especially when combined with something like overpower builds. But anyhow, you might want to just go out of your way to farm up some more of these resources from the various zones. So stuff like Lifespan from Kyrgyzstan, Blightshade from Abbatoir, and so forth, some of the rarer herbs from each zone can be good to pick up while you do Hell Tides and also the green Hell Tides. And even side quests, if you're able to pick them up while doing any of these activities, can oftentimes give you some materials as well. Stuff like Angel Breath is not the easiest to come by either, but they can actually drop from monsters, and especially places like Nightmare Dungeons. And those are the things I've been doing in addition to just straight up leveling up my character and progressing my gear to prepare fully for the Abattoir of Zir. That is surely going to be extremely challenging, and it'll be interesting to see how far we push it. Of course, at the start it's not going to be easy, but as you progress through the Abattoir and keep doing it, you'll also be leveling up a completely new glyph. So that, I suppose, is one other element to consider as well, which is that you will eventually be replacing one of your glyphs with the new, extremely overpowered temporary glyph from the Abattoir. And as you scale up that glyph and level up that glyph, you'll undoubtedly become much more powerful and thus able to do more Abattoir, right? So it's kind of like a loop there. Anyhow, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. If you have any other tips to share, or what build you'll be planning to bring into the Abattoir. I'll personally be sharing my build that I'm still finalizing. It'll likely be some kind of perma-stunning Trapper Twisting Blade Rogue. But with that, stay tuned for that video, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.